What's up, everybody, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions from YouTube and answer them here in video format. A lot to get to, a lot to talk about. It's been a more eventful week than I would have thought, and that's real helpful because the draft is right around the corner. It's a real exciting time in the offseason for Browns fans. So, because it is an exciting time, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're notified because there's going to be a ton of content coming out, draft content, free agency review content. And don't forget the live stream. I will be live streaming day 1, day 2 of the NFL draft here on this channel. Live reactions. We're going to talk about what's going on in the draft, talk about the Mac Jones situation, talk about everything else in this draft, and track the players that we are interested in together. Come hang out with me and watch the draft with me. In order to do that, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you're notified so you can get a notification when I go live on draft day and day 2. Now, with all that being said, I'm going to talk about these questions. And the first question is going to be from Adam, who says, what kind of leap does Baker need to take for the Browns to go to the Super Bowl? What stats does he need to hit to make the team elite and give himself top 5 status? Much love from Australia. I think it's a misnomer that Baker has to up his play for this team to go further than they did last year, or even to the Super Bowl, or even to win the Super Bowl. The fact of the matter is that much worse quarterback play has gotten to and won a Super Bowl, right? What Baker Mayfield was last year is a million times better than Trent Dilfer. Again, that's a different era, but it's also, I would say, about 10 times better than what Jimmy Garoppolo was that season, right? You talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, that's a team with Kyle Shanahan that was running the ball on like pivotal 3rd and 6s because they just didn't trust Jimmy Garoppolo to throw the ball in those situations. Baker Mayfield, they are comfortable giving Baker Mayfield the ball in those clutch money situations, 4th down, whatever you got to do. Baker Mayfield, to this coaching staff, is at least looked at as a difference maker who can make a difference on those downs. And last year, he did a really good job of making a difference on those downs. What held the Browns back from getting to the Super Bowl last year was the defense. Short and simple, right? The defense could not contain well enough. They had injuries all over the place. No Odell Beckham on the offense, but more importantly, no Grant Delpit, no Greedy Williams. Denzel Ward was in and out. Myles Garrett was in and out. All of these things just kind of hit the defense really hard. That wasn't really that deep to begin with. And, you ran into issues down the line. And that's what prevented the Browns from beating the Kansas City Chiefs. You can also argue that, if Rashard Higgins, doesn't lose that ball in the end zone, if he just steps out of bounds or gets called out of bounds, or helmet to helmet gets caught, maybe the Browns do get to the Super Bowl, because I think they would have beat the Bills, but that's a woulda, coulda, shoulda game. My point is that I don't think a leap is necessary for Baker Mayfield. It would be helpful, right? If he does play at that top 5 MVP candidate type level, definitely would be helpful, but I don't think it's necessary. I think the Baker Mayfield we got last year is more than capable enough to win a Super Bowl with, especially when you look at what's surrounding him now on both sides of the ball. I think he's good enough to win a Super Bowl with. I think he can make the critical plays. I think if you need to lean on him, he's good enough to lean on. And yes, he does have area to grow, and hopefully he does take that area of growth. But I'm just saying, I think a lot of focus right now is on the development and the growth of Baker Mayfield. Or if Baker Mayfield takes a leap, that's somehow going to put this team over the top. And I just don't get where that comes from, where when you look at what Baker Mayfield did last year, a lot of worse quarterbacks who aren't capable of doing what Baker Mayfield did last year, have won Super Bowls. So why wouldn't Baker's level of play last year be able to? And again, when you look at what held the Browns back in 2020, wasn't Baker Mayfield. There's really no argument to make that Baker Mayfield held this team back anyway. And that's why, when they're talking about the trade rumors for Baker, well, not even rumors, they weren't substantial, but when people were talking about trading Baker, why I was always against it, because I just didn't think that it would be necessary to upgrade the quarterback play in order to win a Super Bowl. I think Baker Mayfield, if he doesn't improve a single ounce, is good enough to win a Super Bowl with if he played like he did last year, because what you need to win a Super Bowl is a quarterback who can get the ball down the field, who's not going to turn the ball over. And with Baker Mayfield, you get that and some. So, no, he's good enough to win the Super Bowl with. right now. And I think that's why you see the team going all in right now. They're not really relying on Baker to make a jump. They know what Baker is. They know what they can do with them in this offense. They feel confident that you can win a Super Bowl with this version of Baker Mayfield, regardless of if he develops more. And that's a good place to be in if you are a NFL team, right? Next question comes from John Howell, who says, hey, Q, love the content. Help me make sense of the salary cap situation. I looked it up, and all of our free agent signings and re-signings and without incentives in contract this year add up to $43 million, but we only had 24 available in space in free agency. Okay, so there are guys out here that are salary cap specialists. Tony Serino, who I do AFC North talk with, he's somebody who can explain this better than me. Jake Burns is somebody who can explain this a little bit better than me, or at least more technical than I can. So I'm going to do my best to kind of give more of a basic explanation on what happened with the Browns cap space this year and why the Browns aren't cap strapped at all right now. So in technical terms, void years, right? That's what has changed the whole salary cap situation. The Browns are pretty much writing off a ton of the cap obligations or the cap hits for later years down the road in dead money. Dead money is what money is allocated to be taken away from your salary cap because you have cut a player. So they are kind of allocating that money to be hit later on in the salary cap. So next year or the year after with the void years. Whenever you hear void years, that's what that means. They're just kicking the can down the road. The Steelers used to do something very similar with with how they restructure contracts and just put it all in the signing bonus. It's a similar situation to what the Browns are doing, but it's a little bit more technical than that. The basic way to explain this, and just to explain the salary cap in general, because I think there's a common misconception with the salary cap, is that you go into the salary cap, you see 24 million, and you just add up 24 million. There you go. That's all the money you have to spend, because that's kind of how we're conditioned to see it. It's how Madden plays it, and that's how people interact. Regular people interact with the salary cap. But the way I want you guys to think about this is that the salary cap, yes, that's the money that you have in your actual banking account, right? That's the money you got there. But your dead money and the things you use to take advantage of your void years, well, that's credit. That's getting a loan. That's deferring that money till later on when you know you can pay it or when you think you can pay it. And that's what the Browns are doing. The Browns basically have really good credit. And what that means is that they can squeeze all these signings this year at $15 million, and they'll probably get hit with 15 next year and 10 the year after that. They're betting on one thing and they know another thing. They're betting on the salary cap going up, and they also know that they have the cap rollover, and they're kind of structuring all this stuff to hit the same year they have the cap rollover, so that they can use that cap rollover to kind of eat those void years up so they can continue to have a regular off season whenever that comes up. And it's probably going to come up when they have to extend all the 2018 draft guys. So that's kind of the explanation. Just think of the salary cap as credit. Think of salary cap like credit. You know how rich people be broke, but they still be driving around in Lamborghinis because they just got credit and just bought it off credit? That's pretty much how the salary cap works. Teams can be broke, but they can borrow against the cap pretty much on their credit and just do whatever they want. The Chiefs do it all the time. So don't think of the salary cap as this hard thing. It can always be manipulated, and NFL teams are usually pretty good at manipulating that number. The next question comes from King Cam, who says, any other moves the Browns should make in free agency? Keep an eye out on what they're going to do with the other boundary corner position. But other than that, I have no real targets for this team as of right now. The next question comes from LL Chain, who says, who do the Browns draft at 26 now that Clowney is in Cleveland? It can still be a pass rusher. Okay. Honestly, I think getting Clowney actually puts you on the board for more pass rushers, right? Because previously a guy like Ojulari or a guy like Quiddy Pay wouldn't be on my board because I don't think they're day one helpers, right? The only day one helper I see in this draft is Jalen Phillips. But now that you got Clowney in there for at least a year, it might make sense to get a Quiddy Pay or Ojulari who can sit behind them, not be needed to play this year, develop themselves, and then when you're ready to get rid or let Clowney walk next year, if he has a really good year, you can't pay him. You have QnA waiting in the wings, fully developed, ready to help you the next year after Jadeveon Clowney or Ojulari. So I think that actually opens you up in a weird way to more defensive ends, especially if the things at like linebacker and defensive back don't shake out your way, right? If you're at 26 and you're dedicated to staying at 26 and there's no JC Horn, which there probably won't be, and there's no Greg Newsome, and there's no Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah or somebody like that, or Jalen Phillips or something like that, then you might be like, okay, well, QnA's still on the board, or Ojulari's still on the board, and they have great traits, but they need polish, and we got time for polish, so we could polish one of these guys up and kind of store them for a year while we got Clowney on the roster. So I actually think it opens the team up to go defensive end, and I really wouldn't be surprised if they continued in that direction. Next question comes from Mr. Clean, who says, Richard Sherman still on the table? It came out early. They weren't interested in him. I would think it would take a miracle to get him on this team at this point. It just doesn't seem like the Browns are interested, and it doesn't seem like the money will be what Richard Sherman wants it to be in Cleveland. But who knows? Things change all the time like that. Next question comes from Nick Townsend, who says, hey, Q, what's the most draft capital you're willing to move up to take Joker? Do you think there will be a cornerback available in the second round who's good enough to start day one in case Greedy ain't healthy? I do think there will be a corner who's good enough to put there. I think there's a corner that can probably be Terrence Mitchell good. There's probably a handful of corners that can be Terrence Mitchell good in the second round. If you're looking for like a true number 2 corner, I don't know if you're going to get that in the second round this year. So I would think that there's some really good prospects to be that in this year's draft, around the 20s, and that's where I want to go. As far as what would I be willing to give up to trade for Joker, maybe a third or second from next year's draft. Not for Joker, though. I wouldn't be willing to trade up for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I love Jeremiah, but I just don't think that his need is so dire that you have to trade up. I would be more willing to trade up for like a JC Horn, who I think is the best corner in this draft. And if he falls to a reasonable range, I would be willing to give up like a second next year, or like all the extra third and fourth round picks that the team wants, and maybe even swap them second round picks or whatever they want to do there. But that's what I would be willing to do with the team there. Not too much. I'm not giving up a first round pick to move up. And that's why I'm waiting to like 15 to 18 to see what a team wants to do to swap. But I'm not going to spend that much to trade up. Next question comes from Lumps, who says, do the Browns have anyone on their defensive roster that can cover Travis Kelce? If not, is there anyone that can draft who could fill that need? If there was somebody in this draft that can fill the need of just locking down Travis Kelce, they would be like the number 1 or 2 pick in this draft. That's how rare of an athlete you would need to be able to do that. So no, there's nobody on this roster that can do it. There's nobody in the draft that can do it. And there's definitely not going to be anybody at 26 that can do it unless like some Hall of Fame dude just slides all the way down there, which I don't think is possible because I don't even know if there's anybody in this draft that can do that. But what I will say is that stopping Travis Kelce is as much about attacking that Kansas City Chiefs offensive line than it is about having a guy who can shut down. Like, you don't want to be in a situation where you got to see if your coverage holds up against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's not the game to beat the Chiefs, right? You could have Derwin James out there. He's not going to do anything to Travis Kelce if you have to see if he can hold up against the Chiefs. The game against the Chiefs is to see if their offensive line can hold up against your pass rush, right? Because if you break that down, then you don't got to worry about Travis Kelce so much, right? That's the game. That's how you slow down Travis Kelce. You attack the Chiefs' weaknesses. You don't try to match them strength for strength because they're going to have more strength than you have. They're the most talented offense in football, most explosive offense in football. They have a superhero at quarterback, so there's nothing you can really do about that, matching them defensively with firepower. You're always going to be playing from behind if you do that. So what you got to do if you're playing the Chiefs is you got to attack their weakness. Right now, their weakness is offensive line, so you got to go hard at that offensive line. So Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, Malik Jackson, and Sheldon Richardson are as good of a Travis Kelce stopper as you can get, because if they can just stop Patrick Mahomes from being on schedule and finding Travis Kelce, that's good enough for me. Next question comes from Don, who says Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Jalen Phillips, and J.C. Horn are at 26. Who am I taking? So that's my packet of players. That's my main packet of 3 players. The 3 players I really like in this draft, all available at 26. All right, so here's how I'll work this, right? My favorite player in this draft is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, followed second by Jalen Phillips, and I really like J.C. Horn as the best defensive back in this class, but I don't think as a prospect, just raw prospect points, or however you say it, that he's a better prospect than Jalen Phillips, just raw football ability. Like if you factor in the injury history, they're all on the same level, right? So given that, I feel like these are all guys on the equal playing field as far as prospect ability goes. I'm going to have to default to what player I feel like is going to have the biggest impact on this team on day one. Jalen Phillips won't have that impact because I don't think he's going to be able to take time away from Clowney unless Clowney, knock on wood, gets hurt or something like that. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is an interesting pick. I think long-term he would be great for this team, but I do think it's going to take a couple years for him to hit his stride and be the linebacker that he envisions him being. J.C. Horn, on the other hand, I feel like you can draft him, plug him in on that other corner, let him play press man, and he'll be fine. He's a good physical man corner. He can't tackle, but, that's fine for a boundary corner. I'm not really worried about that. So, I'd probably go J.C. Horn if that packet of players is available at 26, by the way. Browns hit the lottery. That would be amazing. Next question comes from Dylan, who says Vegas has the Browns over under at 9.5 wins. Do you think this is reasonable or a little disrespectful considering last year and the season we just had? Hey, Browns fans, look, we know this team is good. We should not have to be looking for validation and respect around every corner. Look, if Vegas wants to put the Browns at 9.5 wins, you don't have to feel disrespected, but you should probably place a bet on the over. That's all I'm saying. Don't let the disrespect that you feel, because if Vegas don't think that this team is really good is as good as it is, get you in the way of making some money, right? So that 9.5, that sounds like a good opportunity to take the over, because I promise you, by the time we get to the regular season, that 9.5, especially if the Browns are healthy going into the season, is going to jump to like 10.5 or 11.5. So take the over. Don't worry about being disrespected. Take the over. This is sound advice. It's not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. I'm just saying, in an entertainment way to protect myself, I would take the over. If it's legal in the state that you live in. I'm not trying to encourage anybody to do anything illegal. So YouTube, don't get me like that. All right, so that's it for this week's questions. Again, guys, thank you guys for asking them. Have a great day. Have a good night.